Hello guys and welcome to the finally long-awaited Void Relic Analysis Part 2 for Warframe. Now, it is highly recommended that you watch the previous episode first, since there are some concepts that were introduced there and I will not be reintroducing here for obvious reasons, because like running out of time and such. So this video, given that, is meant to be a continuation from the last one, so as I said, most things will be taken for granted. Now, let's start with what we are aiming to do with this episode. Mainly, we are here to pick up where we left off, as I said, and sort of give a more, let's just say, mathematical closure and rigor to our model. Now, as usual, there are some prerequisites in order to sort of get everything in this video, which, you know, can get a little bit too much sometimes, but, you know, it's the final result that matters, really. I'm just putting this here so nothing will be like I'm pulling things out of a hat or something. So the prerequisites for this are some set theory, some probability theory, and some combinatorics. Again, these are mainly so you can understand the reasoning behind how the result came about, not exactly to use the result. So you can just skip to the end and find the actual result and use it without having to watch all this. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let us start off by creating a sort of abstract definition to sort of put us in the mathematics and give us a starting place from where we can carry on. So, let us define the set of all possible outcomes from a relic run and label it R for relic, and let us also define the parameter n, which is the number of players in a squad. Also, we will set x1, x2 and x3, you know, indexed like that, to be the different rarities of a relic, meaning that, you know, x1 is the common drop, x2 is the uncommon drop, and then the rare. This means that the set R can be divided into subsets. Let's call these A1, A2 and A3, according to these defined rarities that we have in the game. So, we can define them as R being the multiset, which is a technical term, we don't really have to worry about that, of all possible outcomes of size n, meaning all the possible outcomes you can have for n players. Now, from this set, we sort of choose some elements to define three other sets, which are A1, A2 and A3. We will define A1 as being elements A1 in R. You know, there's distinction there, that's why I use capital and small letters. Elements A1 in R, such that the outcome x1 is in the multiset A1. Now, let me clarify this. x1 is a multiset that contains entries. A1 is inside that multiset. By A1 I mean little a1. Little a1 is inside that multiset, and all the multisets that have little x1 in A1 are inside the set big A1. Likewise, we'll define set big A2 and big A3. So intuitively we have this. We have A1, A2 and A3 possibly overlapping, sharing some elements. And all of this is the set R. Okay? Okay. We will now discuss the notion of a partition. A partition, when you say something is partitioning a set, it means that it has some sort of covering over the set, such that it has a lot of separate covers on the set, such that no cover overlaps. So it's like putting tiles next together. You know, when you put tiles on the floor, the tiles partition the floor. No tile ever overlaps another tile. So yeah, that's an intuitive way to think about it. Hence, we will partition R into partitions x1, x2 and x3, this time big X, capital X, such that the elements of xi, where I is the index, you know, instead of writing x1, x2 and x3 all the time, we will just write xi to refer to them all, where the elements of xi are elements of R that have small xi, we defined previously, as the rarest drop. So all those multisets we mentioned before, the rarest drop they have is small xi. So we are going to assume here that all the members of the squad are going to pick that rarest drop, as we did in the previous video. So mathematically speaking, the capital Xi sets are elements k in R, such that xi is the largest entry in k, which in this mathematical notation, sub k will which sounds kinda silly, refers to the supremum of K, meaning the largest element in K. And this, incidentally, gives us that partition one, because when you combine everything, you take the union, we call it, of all capital XI, you get R, and when you take the intersection being what elements they have in common, you get the empty set, which means that they have nothing in common. So another way to intuitively think about this is this diagram, where the dotted lines picture capital A1, capital A2, and capital A3, and the solid lines are the partitions. As you can see, none of them overlap. X1 is only the part that looks like, I don't know, what's that, an umbrella shape? It doesn't contain anything that's in X3 and X2. Likewise, X2 is sort of like that crescent shape that doesn't contain X3, and X3 happens to be A3, because anything in A3 has little X3 as their highest value drop. Now we need to define a formula for Pijn. I will explain the indices later. But Pijn is the probability with respect to Nj of the outcome being a multiset in set capital Xi. Now we need to find a formula for this, which will be later the final product of this endeavor. We need to find this in terms of Qij. Again, I will explain the indices later. Qij is the probability with respect to j of little xi. So this is the individual probabilities of each entry in a multiset. And phi ij, which is the probability with respect to j of being in the set capital AI. Alright? So let's explain all that index rubbish we have over there. So for Pijn, it is the probability that the rarest drop from n relics of refinement j gives an item of rarity I. So n relics means that there are n people in the squad for the run. Refinement j refers to how refined your relic is. For example, I don't know, intact, flawless, radiant, and exceptional, or what's the other way around? J refers to that level. Now, I refers to the rarity of the item that actually drops. By that I mean the highest rarity item that actually drops, the one that all the players will choose. Now, phi ij is the probability that at least one of the relics of refinement j gives an item of rarity I. So this is an at least one kind of deal here. So this includes the scenario when you get 1, which is why it's at least 1, when you get 2 of rarity I, when you get 3 of rarity I, when you get 4 of rarity I, and so on. So if you get at least 1 of rarity I, then it's included in this value. Now, Qij is the probability that the relic of refinement j gives an item of rarity I. In layman's terms, these are the values in game. So, for example, for an intact relic, you have 72%, I think, that you get the common, 20-something% that you get the uncommon, and 2% that you get the rare. This is what the QIs are. So, there's nothing really big here, this is just fancy notation. The QIs are the values that are in the game, that you can find on Wiki. So, we note that the set AI without AJ union AK, bear in mind that I, J, and K here are distinct. So all of these A sets, they are separate. They're never the same one. For example, you can have A1 without A1 union A1. The distinction between them is important here. So this set, when you take this set and remove some stuff and then add some stuff from another set, contains only one element, which is where everyone gets the same item. And the probability of this is Qij to the n power. Now, again, I won't go into how it is this value. I think I covered it in the last video, but just in case you don't know, just take my word for it. I'm sure there are a lot of explanations for this. Also, the complement of that set is simply AJ union AK, with the same J and K as used in the other set. And the probability of this is 1 minus Qij to the n. This is because this is the definition of a complement. The probability of a complement of set A is 1 minus the probability of A. That's just, a defined result. I cannot prove that because it's axiomatic. Now, from AJ union AK, we use the inclusion-exclusion principle. This is just a fancy name for something that can give us an expansion formula for writing AJ union AK in terms of AJ, AK, and their intersections. Now, for this, we know that AJ union AK, its probability is 1 minus Q to the n. And we get, when we expand it with the inclusion-exclusion principle, we get that 1 minus Q to the n is equal to the probability of AJ plus the probability of AK and minus the probability of AJ intersection AK. Remember, the intersection is the common elements of AJ and AK. In this case, rearranging a bit, we get that the probability of this intersection is the probability of AJ plus the probability of AK minus 1 plus Qij to the n. This is just some simple algebra here, which I'm sure with some thinking you can figure it out. Rearranging and relabeling indices to get probability of A sub A intersection A sub B is equal to the probability of A sub A plus the probability of A sub B minus 1 plus Q to the n. This is what we had before, just relabeling. Instead of I and J, we replace them with A and B respectively. So this gives us, by the definition of the probability of AI, we get the probability of AI is equal to phi ij, as we defined previously. So we can just substitute in and we get the probability of A sub A intersection A sub B is phi aj plus phi bj plus qij to the n minus 1. And I know phi bj sounds really funny. Now, all that is left to find is a formula for phi ij. Obviously, this is given by 1 minus, open bracket, 1 minus qij, close bracket, to the power of n, as you can see on the screen. And I will not necessarily go into detail on why this is the case. This is similar to how the status chance per pellet shotguns is calculated. So there are a lot of videos about that. I suggest you watch one. The one I like the most in terms of content is the one by Zelp. His name is with an X3LP. So yeah, he's mathematically a very rigorous individual. So I suggest that you go watch that video. And while you're there, watch some other videos because they're really, really informative. So anyway, back to topic. Now we have all the pieces that we will need in order to derive expressions for Pijn. As you know, Pijn was defined previously. So to construct these, we shall use the Venn diagram of the partitions. So for the probability with respect to Jn of x1, which is what P1Jn is probability with respect to J of A1 minus the probability with respect to J of A1 intersection A2 minus the probability of A1 intersection A3 plus the probability of A1 intersection A2 intersection A3. That was a mouthful. Now, if you sort of do some probability theory and set algebra, we get that this is nothing but the probability with respect to J of A1 without A2 union A3. To understand why this is the case, there is only one element where little x1 is the highest. It's only when you have all of them x1. Otherwise, if you have any other thing, any other xi, that xi would be higher because x1 is the lowest rarity. So that's an intuitive way to look at this, but you can, take your time with the set algebra and work it out. So, as we have seen before, which is why I covered it before, this is nothing but q1j to the power of n. Now, let's take a look at the probability with respect to jn of x2. So, this is the probability with respect to j of a2 minus the probability with respect to j of a2 union a3. So, now we have that union over there, which we can expand with the inclusion-exclusion principle. So we get that. And remember, we have a minus sign in front of this, so that has to be distributed along the terms of the inclusion-exclusion expansion. So this results in having the probability with respect to j of a2 minus the probability of a2 minus the probability of a3 minus q1j to the n plus 1. Now, as you can see, there are some cancellations here, and we get that this probability is equal to 1 minus the probability of a3 minus q1j to the n. But this is just as we have seen previously with the complement and such. This is 1 minus q3j all to the n. If you substitute for p of a3, you get some nice cancellations there, and you end up with 1 minus p3j all to the n. And from that you take away q1j to the n. From this you get 1 minus q3j all to the n. Take away q1j to the n. And hence, now all that's left is the probability with respect to jn of x3. Now, this, as we have seen before, is nothing more than the probability with respect to j of a3, because whenever you have from the set a3, the highest you can have is little x3. So anything in the set a3 is automatically, everyone will choose little x3. So therefore it's the entire, this partition is the entire set as we have seen previously. So this is nothing more than what we have seen before, which is like the shotgun status formula, which is 1 minus bracket 1 minus q3j bracket to the n. Now, therefore, we can summarize all this crap and sort of list down what we have so far. So p1jn is q1j to the n. p2jn is 1 minus q3j all to the n, taking away q1j to the n. p3jn is 1 minus q3j to the n. Now all that's left to do is to combine these such that we can get everything from one formula, meaning all you have to do is literally plug in the values that you want, and it essentially spits out the probability of getting the outcome that you want, depending on what you feed into it. So, you know, now there may be some play with indices here, so I stay strong, young Tenno. Now, we can trivially say that anything plus 0, or should I say anything plus any number of zeros, still gives you that same thing back. I mean, there's nothing hard about this. It's, you know, high school shit. I think it's way even earlier than high school. So, let's do a little mathematician's trick. Let's let p1jn equal to p1jn plus 0 plus 0. Nothing crazy so far. We have not changed anything. Likewise, let's do the same for p2jn and p3jn, but let's be a little bit clever about this. And as you all know, for any two numbers, say 1 and 3, 1 plus 3 is the same as 3 plus 1, which are both equal to 4. So let's sort of shift these around and make p2jn equal to 0 plus p2jn plus 0 and p3jn equal to 0 plus 0 plus p3jn. Nothing out of the ordinary so far, so bear with me here. Now, as you know, anything times 0 gives you 0. For example, 5 times 0 is still 0. So let's be a little more sneaky now and let p1jn be equal to 1 times p1jn plus 0 times p2jn plus 0 times p3jn. As you can see, after cancelling out, you still end up with p1jn. Likewise, let's insert the others in for p2jn and p3jn. And as you can see, there's starting to form a pattern. We have all the pijn's being a constant, that's either 1 or 0, times p1jn, another constant times p2jn, and another constant times p3jn. Now, here comes the fun part, if I should say. All we need to do is find an expression for that constant, such that where you put I equals 1, it cancels out all I equals 2 and I equals 3. When you put I equals 2, it cancels out P1 and P3. And when you put I equals 3, it cancels out P1 and P2, which means that we can have Pijn in one formula, and we can call out the different probabilities by setting I differently, as we originally intended to do. So, let's write this in a general form as Pijn equals small a1. Do bear in mind that this little a1 is different than the a1 used to define the sets in the beginning. That a1 from the sets, the little a1 from the sets is now extinct or some shit, and this is a new one, so just a placeholder for now. So we get Pijn equals a1 times p1jn plus a2 times p2jn plus a3 times p3jn. Now we need the k's, let's use k as a subscript here because I is getting a bit boring, must preserve the structure of what's called in mathematics a Kronecker delta, which is, this is sort of a discrete function where it is labeled as delta I k, and for different inputs of I and k, if I and k are equal, the Kronecker delta is equal to 1. If I and k are not equal, the Kronecker delta is equal to 0, which is what we actually want here. So let's choose these in a cunning manner. Let's set a1 equal to I minus 2 times I minus 3 all over 2, and a2 as minus I minus 1 times I minus 3, and a3 as I minus 2 times I minus 1 all over 2. Now, in order to get these, there were some really complicated algebraic manipulations, so I will just try to give an outline here. So, we need that this entire function is equal to 0 when I is equal to 2. For example, let's take a1. We need it to be equal to 0 when I is equal to 2, or where I is equal to 3. Therefore, in that first bracket, when I is equal to 2, I minus 2 is 0. Therefore, it makes the entire function 0. Likewise, in the third bracket, when I equals 3, 3 minus 3 is 0, and that makes the entire function equal to 0. Now, if we get I equals 1, we need the function to be equal to 1. So, taking these two brackets and substituting I equals 1, we get 1 minus 2, which is minus 1, times 1 minus 3, which is minus 2, minus 1 times minus 2 is 2. Therefore, with only those brackets, we get that a1 is equal to 2 when I is equal to 1. Therefore, since we need it to equal 1, we just divide the whole thing by 2, hence the division by 2 you see over there. So now, if you play with the values, you get a1 is 1 for I equals 1, and for I equals 2 and 3, you get a1 is 0. This same reasoning follows for a2 and a3, where the normalization constant is for the first one a half, which is why there's that division by 2, for the second one a negative 1, which is why there's the minus sign, and for the third one is again a half, hence the division by 2. So, if we substitute in these expressions for a1, a2 and a3 in the PIJN formula, and we simplify and, you know, have a cup of coffee, give up for a few hours, and then return and find your way around it, and then give up again, and, you know, the wonderful life of being a mathematician, we get this formula for PIJN. Now, I'm gonna try and read this out loud, which is a mouthful. So, PIJN is equal to half times 3i minus 4 times I minus 3 times P1j to the power of n minus 3i minus 8 times I minus 1 times 1 minus Q3j to the power of n plus I minus 1 times I minus 2. There's an interesting quirk after you simplify, due to the nature of how the equations for P1, P2 and P3 came out, is that this formula is independent of Q2j. It doesn't appear in here, so technically all you need to know are the probability of the common item for one relic and the probability of the rare item from one relic. Now, think about it, this does make sense, because all probabilities are equal to 1. If you sum over all the probabilities, you should get 1, because you're guaranteed to get one of those items, at least. So, if you consider only the rare and common, it sort of falls naturally how the uncommon would behave, because it's the remainder, you know? So, here are the tabulated values for any size squad with respective drop chances. So, we have, you know, these graphs here. Feel free to take a look at them. As I mentioned, I will probably keep trying to upload this Excel sheet, which I will link in the description when I do, but I had some difficulty the last time, so I won't necessarily promise it, but make sure to check the description every once in a while in case I manage to do so. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. If you have any queries, feel free to ask me. I mean, I'll do my best to reply and explain myself, hopefully a bit better than I did here. And if you enjoyed, feel free to like, subscribe, and, you know, it just helps, because I know that at least my work is appreciated. So, have a good day. Bye.